Hi, welcome to Druid Talks. Today we will be talking about the four cities of the Tuatha de Danann, their possible mythological and geographical situation according to Joseph Monard, along with other considerations from Dr. David Frawley and the Breton artist Serge Pinault, his illustrations, and so on. Back in 1995, and based on indications found in the Irish texts, the French Celtic scholar and researcher Joseph Monard attempted to locate the actual whereabouts of the fabled insular cities mentioned in the Irish texts. In doing so, he published a paper in Ialon-Clairière, the Breton Druidical Studies Journal, only to find himself in a mire of doubt and criticism. The reason being that the majority of the French exegetes viewed the stories found in the takings of Ireland as strictly mythological, and thus having no true historical grounding. The task of proving his point was more than just a walk in the park, and the difficulty was twofold. On one hand, the setting of a sound chronology, and on the other, identifying the possible geographical location for these mythical cities was quite difficult. In historical terms, the events surrounding the Tuatha de Danann have occurred during the archaeological period of the corded ware culture, otherwise known as the battle axe culture, dated from around circa 3000 to 2350 BCE. And this early Bronze Age culture, post-dating and overlapping the Bell Beaker mythological tomb culture, circa 34 to 28 BCE, was identifiable to the Proto-Celtic and Proto-Germanic peoples, and attested archaeological sites were indeed located on the actual territories of Atlantic Germany, Denmark, and the Western Baltic. So Monard postulated that the Tuatha de Danann were identified or deified ancestors whose origins could be explained through paleohistory. And here is a translation of one of the letters he wrote to me on this subject. We know that the medieval Irish storytellers have introduced a number of more or less pan-Celtic deities into the mythological tale of the Tuatha de Danann and of their adversaries, the Fomori, these being Bud, Kihol, Lir, Lu, Midir, Nuada, Ogma, and so on. These corresponded to the ancient Celtic Katu Badua, Kikoluis, Lero, Lugos, Medros, Nodons, and Ogmios. So they end up euhemerizing all of the Tuatha de Danann heroes as gods and demigods. Suggests that their original name might not have been of theonymic origin, that means a god name, and could have been the names of deceased heroes or ancestors. The lore surrounding the Irish Tuatha de Danann, the Greek Dananns, and the Vedic Danavas was reminiscent of an earlier common Indo-European past, and these stories seem to come from a much older stratum of myths, and therefore could indicate a common Indo-European theme. In Greek mythology, the Dananns were the children of Danaos, son of the god Belos and Anshimoe. At the time of the Trojan War, all of the Hellenic peoples identified themselves as Dananns, and hence as descendants of Poseidon through Belos and Danaos. These were their primordial ancestors, Belos and Danaos. So in Celtic terms, this would have been Dana and Bel. And according to the Rig Veda, Danu was the mother of the Danava, a legendary race of demons predating the Manavas, the children of Manu, the first mortal man. Monard thought that the Danann, or the Greek Danans, and the Egyptian Danann were all of the same. So the Danann, after having raided Egypt, were forced back onto Cyprus and became known as the Danann. And as the Danann, they contributed to the fall of the Hittite Empire. Then, as the Danai, they mingled with the Achaeans and led them into the Battle of Troy. And the apprehensions of Laocoon were expressed thus 1,000 years later. Timeo Danaos et Dona Ferentes. And so, as for the Vedic scholar David Frawley, who I also questioned on this matter, he wrote many articles on the subject, and as to whether the Danavas and the Vedas were of a divine or a human nature. And this is what we can read on page 237 of the Rig Veda and the History of India, which he wrote. Danu and Danava occur in Vedic literature mainly as negative terms associated with Vritra, the great enemy of Indra, the leader of the gods. And in the main Rig Vedic myth, Indra slays the dragon Ahi Viritra, who lies at the foot of the mountain withholding the waters, and releases the 7 rivers to flow on into the sea. Ahi is called Danu. Vritra is called Danava, meaning the son of Danu, and he is a serpent. And in the Yahur Veda, Tvastar, son of Vishwarupa, is also called Vritra, and is the Purohit, the chief priest of the gods and cousin of the Asuras. In the Brahmanas, Vishwarupa, Vitra is the son of Danu and Danayu. The names of the mother and father of Vitra is Vishwarupa, the son of the god Tvastar, and of the goddess Danu. And on page 240, Frawley goes on to explain that such terms as Danava, Daityas, Dasu, Rakshasas, and Asuras eventually became synonyms and could stand for any group of inimic. So finally, the Maruts are the most connected to Danu of the Vedic gods. They are frequently called Sudanu, Sudanava, good to give, or good Sudanus, the good Danus. The Vishwadevas, or universal gods, which include groups such as the Maruts, are called Sudanava, and making the gods of the earth, Vashu, atmosphere, Maruts, and heaven, Adityas, and all of the Sudanavas. What is exposed here by Frawley is a universal Indo-European theme common not only to the Eastern Adianic traditions, but also to the Western Danann ones, which would have been ancestral to the Tuatha De Danann. That is, the Devas and the Asuras of the Vedas correspond to the Vanir and the Aesir of the Scandinavians, or to the Irish Danans and the Fomoris, and were two conflicting races of deities. But again, Frawley also states that these opposing groups could have consisted of any group of inimical people, and this falls in line with Monard's view on the Danans as an early ethnic group of the Proto-Indo-Europeans. And also of interest was he mentioned that in the Vedic hymns of 2 races of primordial ancestors, the Danavas and the Sudanavas. So therefore, the Danavas proper and the good Danavas. So which would mean Asu would also imply that they were to the south of the others. So the Danavas would have been the northern race, and the Sudanavas would have been the southern race of the Danans. And to summarize, this is how Monard explains the early penetration of the Danubian Indo-Europeans into Western Europe. It seems that they were, along with others such as the Lusatians of mixed Proto-Illyric and Proto-Celtic origin, and who at that time were hardly distinguishable. It also seems likely that they were detrimental in the Indo-Europeanization of their Hyperborean Proto-Finnish neighbors of the North Baltic, and who eventually became known as the Germanic speakers. Mentioned by the Egyptians were labeled Atlantean by Plato. In fact, the geographers of antiquity maintained that Cape Skagen in Denmark was called Celtica Litarmis, henceforth the Proto-Celtic ancestors of the Guedels that had come from Denmark. And in his letter dated 1995, Monard added the following. According to Jürgen Spanuth in Das Intraselt Atlantis, their capital was situated around the island of Heligoland, this nimbled island formerly being the location of its higher town, later called Hertha by the Germanic peoples. And Plato in Critias 115 named this Atlantean capital or citadel Basileia, which in Greek literally means the royal center. And this was the homeland of, according to Monard, of the Prest, the Frist in the Egyptian hieroglyphs, and later Germanized as the Frisir, were ancestor to the Franks. Was protected along the shore by an oceanfront dune bank, now washed away through the actions of the rough seas. The residual remnants of this coastline are now formed by three broken chains of the Frisian islands: the western island of Texel, and Ratumerug, the northern banks of the Netherlands, the eastern island of Borkum and Wangerug, and on the coast of Germany with Ostfriesland, and on the north from Amrun, Sylt, and Fano, then on the west of Schleswig in Germany and Jutland in Denmark. So this about situates the area around Denmark. And the elite of the Venetic League, this Venetic League, which was mentioned by Caesar in the Bellico Gallico, the war commentaries, consisted of the most powerful and influential Gaelic nations, which included the Belgians, the Britons, the Guadels. And in the book of the Takings of Ireland, they are justly enumerated as follows: the Fir Bolg, the Fir Galion, the Fir Domnan, all falling under the leadership of the Dananns. So after 4 centuries of the sea people's ventures into the eastern Mediterranean islands and coastal shores, and at the end of a long war, the Cimmerian kingdoms of Crimea and Asia Minor were overwhelmed by the Scyths and were swept out of Crimea and the Pontic territories. We know from a thorough study by the Romanian epigraphist historian Vasile Parvan, who was born in 1882 and died in 1927, that the great part of the Cimmerian nation moved up the Danube Valley and its tributaries, and the Cimmerians merging with the Illyrians contributed largely to the development of the Proto-Celtic Hallstatt Iron Age culture, which was around 800 to 450 BCE. And having leadership in the equestrian warriors class, their nobility led them into the Great Hungarian Plain, further beyond the Danube, and around the Alps into the Po River Valley of Italy, where they were known as the Boians. And a good part of this contingent reached the North Sea and settled in Jutland, which was to become Cimbria, then populated after the Danann departure for the British Isles and Ireland. the Danish peninsula became known as Chimerice Chersonesos by the Greeks and translated by the Romans as Hersonesus Cimbrica. There they ruled over the remaining Germanized Danuni, the Danir, and this coalition became known as the Cimroi and was Latinized as the Cimbri due to a Celtic pun on Cimroi, racketeers and extortionists, and their true name, which were the Cimerioi. And in such prosaic, which were the ancestral figures, and in such prosaic terms, the Yellow Book of Lacan, as 4 jewels of the Tuatha de Danann, goes on to describe the Tuatha de Danann as they arrived in Ireland, and this is how they describe them arriving in Ireland. Some of the historians indeed say that the Tuatha de Danann came to Ireland in a cloud of mists, but this is not so, for they came in a great fleet of ships, and after arriving in Ireland, they burnt all of their vessels, and from the cloud of mists that arose from them, some said that they came in a cloud of mists, so that's why they say that they came in a cloud of myths. And in much more prosaic terms, the Yellow Book of Lacan, the 4 jewels of Tuatha de Danann, goes on to describe how the Tuatha de Danann arrived in Ireland. So this is how it goes. Some of the historians indeed say that the Tuatha de Danann came to Ireland in a cloud of myths. But this is not so, for they came in a great fleet of ships, and after arriving in Ireland, they burnt all of their vessels, and from the cloud of myths that arose from them, some said that they came in a cloud of myths. And this, however, is not true, for these are the 2 reasons why they burnt their boats, and that race of the Fomorians might not find them in order to prey upon them, and that Lu might not come in order to contend against Nuada for the sovereignty. And again, in the 4 jewels of the Tuatha de Danann, there's this mention of the children of Beotach who came to Lachlan with all of their ships, and these descendants of Beotach could very well have belonged to a contingent of the Venetic League. In this same letter, Joseph Monard had this to say on the Venetic mariners, identified by by Caesar as a Gaulish maritime nation. The Veneti of the Atlantic coast was a Celticized unit of maritime diaspora. They adopted the Celtic idiom as a coiny and absorbed it into the culture of the time of the late Latine historical period. They operated in the Irish Sea, in the Adriatic Sea, and in the Black Sea as well. And of course, the Veneti was the Latin spelling for the Celtic Venetoi mentioned by Caesar in his Gaelic war commentaries. This is the Bello Gallicum 2 and 3, who were the leading component of the Armorican Confederacy. Their country is now called Bro-Gwened in Breton and Veneti in French. We do not know if the Vendée also stems from this origin, but it is very likely. At the time of the struggle of the Britons against the Anglo-Saxon invaders, there was a little western kingdom named Venedotia, which was most likely another outpost of the Venetoi and the British nations known as the Cumbrogis, the Cimri, the compatriots, were cornered into Wales and Cornwall after they were raided by the Germanic tribes, the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes. And so these Welsh were aided by the remaining Venetic fleet to resettle in Armorica. The Britannic name for it was Venedotia, and which gradually morphed into the Welsh Gwynedd, which was exactly the same as the Breton Gwynedd. So now back to the 4 cities now, which is the most important part of it. So after having situated these, as Monard hypothesized that these cities were situated around Denmark. If we look into the actual names given in the Irish texts, so we can give them a possible situation and also explain the etymologies of the names. So to the northwest, we could say that there was Findias, which would have been the, let's say, the genitive of Windia, which means the splendid, the white. And of course, the ruling druid master there was Wiskias, or Udeskios in the Old Celtic form. To the northeast would have been Gorias, the genitive of Goria, the garden enclosure, the warm, connoting the warm place. And of course, the master would have been Esras, and this would the etymology of it would be Esdrios or Esdratis. To the southwest was the city of Morias, Moria, which was the sea, or also connoting the great. And the master there was Semias, Semios or Semiatis in Old Celtic. And then the city of Phalias, Walia, the mighty, the bad, or the stone ledge, would have had as a master Morphes or Morwesos, or Morias, from Morios or Moriatos of the sea. So the Tuatha De Danann were from the islands of the north of the world, and according to the Book of Lecan, a band of people of Beotach, the lively one. And after many hardships in Ireland, they left for the northeast and landed in Scandinavia. There they learned the science of prophecy, druidism, witchcraft, and the knowledge of every poetic art that was in the world. And thence they went into Greece, and after the mastery of many trades, they came from there towards Ireland in the footsteps of their fathers and of their grandfathers, and in the respect of their origin. These were the Tuatha De Danann. And to the southeast, out of Phalias, was brought the stone of Fal, which was in Tara. To the east, to the southeast lies the island of the Mighty, which is the poetic name of Britain. The most powerful of Britons were in the south, but as regards now to the 30 warriors of Nemed's descendants who escaped, they divided Ireland into three parts. These were the three leaders which they had, the Beotach Mac Yarbonel, namely the prophet Nemet and Simon MacStern, MacNemet, and Britain Mel MacFergusa, Lethderk MacNemed, Britain. A Nemedian fled from Ireland after being defeated by the Fomorians and resettled on the island of Britain. So to the west, out of Morias, the great fortress was shipped to Ireland in a huge and powerful treasure, which was the cauldron of Dagda. No one who eats from it is left unsatisfied. The Morini, the maritime people, were a tribe of the Belgian coast. Lou arrives at Tara from the west during the first battle of Mahtured. To the southwest was situated Tehluin, the House of Dawn, Lord of Death, and the first man of the seed of the tuneful Breton, belonging to them who died in Great Ireland was Don, son of Mil, setting aside Ir, from whom is the name of Tehluin of retainers. And to the west was the island of Emain Blah, ruled by Danann MacLír, the island on which was the orchard, which was said to be off the coast of Alba, to the west of Scotland, according to the Irish Imran Bren. a tale of the fabulous sea voyages of Bran, while in a a beautiful fairy gives him a silver apple blossom branch. So northwest, out of Findias, was brought the sword of Nuada. Nuada Argetlam was a high king of Ireland and ruler of the Tuatha de Danann. He lost his hand during the first battle of Martured, which was fought against the Firbolg, and had a silver one made by the godly physician Ialon-Clairière. And after Bress, Nuada was again in sovereignty over the Tuatha De, and at that time he held for the Tuatha De a mighty feast at Tara. And so northeast, out of Gorias was brought the spear of Lu, and Lu was the son of Hien and of Balor, and daughter of Etlin. This made him De Danann and half Fomorian, thus part god and part Titan. And now the Tuatha De made an alliance with the Fomorians, and Balor, the grandson of Nit, gave him a daughter, Ethne, to Kian, son of Ialon-Clairière, and she brought forth this gifted child, Lu. So as a reminder, this mythologizing of the world was not unique to the Celts and was maintained in other European traditions following Greek mythology. Colchis was the fabled land of the east. Ethiopia was the land of the south. The Hesperides or the Elysium fields were seen as the islands located in the western end of the earth. And of course, Hyperborea or Arcadia was positioned to the north. In an orchard of the blessed islands of the Hesperides, where the sun sets, where there blossom golden apples guarded by the 100-headed dragon Ledon, son of the Titan Typhon, and of the nymph Hina. And the setting sun was poeticized as the golden apple, of course. And so this kingdom of the Titan Atlas was found by the Hesperides, sometimes counted as 4 and often 7. And of course, in the Germanic myths, the world tree Yggdrasil was rooted in the north of the world, and its roots spread into the earth in all directions. And 3 of its roots reached the worlds of Asgard, Midgard, and Niflheim. In the poetic Eddas, the golden apples of the goddess Idun restored the subjects. So all of this sums pretty much what we had discussed in our correspondence with Joseph Monard and David Frawley, amongst others. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. You will find the link in the description box below, and also the credits at the end of this video. Thank you very much. All for now.